This is a gaming PC I put together for roughly $1,500, and for that price, I was able to fit in a Ryzen 7 7800X3D and RX 9070, which makes for a very solid gaming PC. It did require a decent amount of deal hunting, but I was able to find everything online, so I didn't get any like crazy back alley deals that were only available to me in my local market. The deals were available to pretty much anyone else in the US at the time that I found them. Some of the deals were limited, however, and may not be available anymore, but that's just the nature of deal hunting. Good prices come and go, but for every deal that has passed, another one is usually right around the corner, so you just have to keep your eyes peeled. So this video isn't to show you an exact one-for-one blueprint to replicate, but instead it's meant to walk you through my thought process on how and why the parts were chosen. So if you were interested in building your own, you could get some inspiration or use this as a loose springboard for ideas. And fun fact, this was my first time building in a PC case with wood accent, and what better case for my first time than the newly released Aircross from Okinos, who's actually the sponsor of this video. I've used their cases in the past before and have had good experiences with them, so I was happy to work with them when they reached out. I'll get more into the Aircross specifically and what it has to offer later on in the video, but let's start at the top of the parts list with the CPU like we always do. And for this build, we're starting off with the Ryzen 7 7800X3D. While the 7800X3D is not the latest and greatest gaming CPU anymore, that title has since gone to the 9800 X3D. It is still a solid runner-up and is arguably better value most of the time because it's usually around $100 cheaper. If you've got 9800 X3D money, then by all means go for it, but for a $1,500 build, that's too tall of an order. The 10-ish% performance gains aren't worth the 30-ish% price premium. Some might even make the argument that X3D chips aren't really necessary because plenty of games are bottlenecked by the GPU, so an X3D chip wouldn't be that beneficial unless you've got like a super high-end graphics card. And we'll explore that later on in the benchmarks where I'll show you the difference between the 7800 X3D and one of the most budget-friendly and entry-level AM5 processors, the 7500F. Cooling the 7800 X3D is the Thermalright Phantom Spirit. I went with this version that's completely blacked out on the heatsink and fans. Not much else to say here. Thermalright often is the value play regardless of what price range you're working with. For under $40, you're getting a dual tower heatsink, 7 heat pipes, and more than enough cooling capability for the 7800 X3D. The motherboard I'm using is the Asus TUF Gaming B850 Plus Wi-Fi. I was able to grab this for $154 from Amazon Resale, which is the rebranding of what was formerly known as Amazon Warehouse. This was marked as used acceptable condition. I've had good experiences with secondhand motherboards directly from Amazon over the years, and on the off chance that there's a missing accessory that's crucial or it arrives defective, returns are super quick and easy, so there isn't much risk. Despite this being marked as only acceptable, which is pretty low on the list of conditions they could designate, it ended up being pretty much pristine. All of the plastic peels were still in place, and I could not find any signs of use. So I'm not sure why it was marked as only acceptable, but I'm not complaining. I'm not particularly attached to specific manufacturers or models when it comes to choosing motherboards, so long as it has sufficient I/O, doesn't have a reputation for being problematic or failing prematurely, and has some semblance of cooling consideration for the VRMs, then I'll usually let the price dictate my buying decision. In this box contains the graphics card for this build. This is what Newegg calls an OEM brown box version of the Sapphire Pulse RX 9070. I picked this up for $550, which is the MSRP of the 9070. This packaging definitely gives vibes of how manufactured refurbished products are typically sold, but that's not the case here because this card is indeed brand new. This was the first time I've personally seen a 9070 in the wild for MSRP since launch, and for a $1,500 gaming PC, it slots in pretty nicely. The one minor gripe I have with this card specifically is the small amount of red accents on it. They go a bit against the stealth out aesthetic that I was going for with this build, but at the time of purchasing, all the other 9070s were decently more expensive and not worth the premium just to get something more color neutral. Next up is memory, and this was my first time using 48 gigs of RAM in a build instead of the more typical 32 or 64 gigs. This comes by way of this 2x24 gig kit of Team Group T-Create Expert DDR5 rated at 6400 CL32. I'm a big fan of the T-Create series, is often competitively priced, and has a clean, subtle design that fits well for RGB-less and stealth builds. 48 gigabytes does feel a bit strange in terms of the amount of system memory because for the longest time, we've kind of been just doubling the standard of memory people have had. 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 to 64, but going from 32 to 64 gigs is kind of a big gap. The person I'm building this PC for currently floats around 30 gigs of RAM usage day to day with their current rig, and they wanted some headroom but didn't need the entire 64 gigs. And with memory prices surging as of recently, 48 gigs made sense for them as a good middle ground. Storage-wise, we've got the Team Group T-Force G50 Gen 4 M.2 NVMe SSD. Like the T-Create RAM, this is competitively priced and strikes a good balance between capacity, performance, and value. It features TLC NAND, which puts it a step above the cheapest of the budget drives out there that are usually QLC based. And while it doesn't have DRAM, it does have HMB or host memory buffer and a large SLC cache to compensate for being DRAM-less. It comes with a graphene heat spreader in case you're freeballing this drive on a motherboard without an included heatsink, but the board we're going with has heatsink coverage for all 3 of its M.2 slots, so I won't be using this. For the power supply, we've got another Amazon resale special, this Cooler Master MWE Gold 850V2. This was marked as very good condition, down from its usual price of around $100. The packaging looks a bit rough on the outside, but on the inside, the power supply was in perfectly good condition. For the components we've got in this build, this is more than enough power and gives it a decent amount of headroom for future upgrades. And for quick reference for the tier list enjoyers out there, this lands at a B+ grade on the newer SPL's PSU tier list. And last but not least, the case, the Okinos Air Cross. If you're looking for tons of airflow for your core components, then look no further. Providing cooling for the CPU is 2 front 140mm intake fans, and down below at the graphics card, there's 2 reverse blade 120mm intake fans. At the rear of the case, there's a 140mm exhaust fan. The bottom chamber is rearranged such that the power supply is mounted at the front, leaving the space below unobstructed for those GPU-facing fans to pull in fresh air from all directions. This placement of the power supply is not new by any means. The Lynnwood 207 was the first to do this, and I think we'll be seeing a lot more of this layout moving forward from other case manufacturers. Similar to how when we saw the rise of like dual chamber cases started to become a lot more popular, a lot of the manufacturers adopted similar layouts because it's just good design. That said, it's very apparent that Okinos wanted to offer more function to set itself apart from the 207 by adding in additional features to enhance the functionality, like by making it back connect ready, which makes it compatible with motherboards with backside connectors for those chasing extreme minimalist cable-free builds. On the backside, they also gave much attention to making cable management easier by providing plenty of room. The forward section has 37mm of clearance, and directly behind the motherboard, there's 33mm, so that's over 1¼ inches across the entire backside. They've also designed in plenty of tie-off points, built-in Velcro straps, and put in rubber grommets to set you up for cable managing success. Regarding the wood accent, the thing I like most about this compared to other wood-themed cases that I've seen is that the Air Cross keeps it pretty modest. It doesn't take up like a large area or overwhelm the case, and pairing it with what they call the Starlight power button, that's the big gold power button there, I think it complements the wood nicely for a more sophisticated look than the typical gamery aesthetics that we often see. All the removable panels are toolless and have no fasteners, which is personally one of my favorite things that can be designed into any case. I hate thumb screws. I much prefer these ball studs that snap into place, so big bonus points here from me. The top of the case is also easily removable to reach those pesky top connectors, headers, and screws that can often be a pain to access once the cooler is installed. They've also included not 1, but 2 angled brackets to alleviate GPU sag for long, chunky graphics cards. I really like the thoughtfulness of that second piece, so the graphics card can essentially be clamped into place to prevent it from moving either up or down. The Air Cross pretty much hits on all the things I would want in a case. I can't really think of much else I could ask from it. It's like they thought of all the things a person might complain about in a case and they addressed it. This case comes in at $90. And right now they're actually running a limited time launch promo where you can get it for only $80. So if you're in the market for a case and like what you see in here, you can pick this up and save yourself a little bit of extra money on a seriously awesome case. So that's everything in the build. Let's take a quick look at the summary and price breakdown. As is, this comes in just over $1,500. Now, if you're working with a smaller budget, there are ways to drastically reduce the cost of this build while still maintaining a very solid level of gaming performance. And that would be by foregoing the 7800X3D for a Ryzen 5 chip, like I mentioned earlier. Any of the listed CPUs on the screen would pair well with the RX 9070. And I'll show you how viable they'd be when we get to the benchmark by using the weakest of the bunch for the comparison. Going with the Ryzen 5, you can comfortably use a $20 tower cooler and it'd be plenty sufficient. And you can also get some savings going with a 32GB kit of memory if you know that's enough for you. I imagine it would be for the majority of people out there. So stacking all these changes up, we've now pushed the price well below $1,300, which is a decent amount of money saved for a still very solid system. Here's a time lapse of me putting it together. I'll let this play out, followed by some B-roll glamour shots of everything fully assembled. I'm pretty satisfied with how this build came out aesthetically. It's not perfect, but overall I think it looks good. I still would have preferred that graphics card to be more color neutral, but once the tempered glass is on, it's not as noticeable. I did play with the idea of using cable extensions that matched the 9070, and the set I found had the perfect color combination to go with it in theory. Like side by side, they looked great together, but in execution, that wasn't the case. I installed them and they simply stood out way too much. I was not a fan of how much they popped compared to the rest of the build. It just looked way too out of place. Okay, now let's take a look at what this can do. The target resolution for this build is 1440p. That's where the 9070 makes the most sense in my opinion. Now, I did test a range of different titles as well as some CPU specific benchmarks because I do want to showcase the differences between the 7800 X3D and a cheaper Ryzen 5 like the 7500F. So even though I didn't do 1080p benchmarks, you'll still see the differences in CPU bound scenarios such as with esports titles. So yeah, sit back, relax, and enjoy the benchmarks. Alright, so those were the benchmarks. I'm curious, what are your thoughts between the 7800 X3D versus the 7500F after seeing those numbers? For the money you can save going with any of the Ryzen 5s, which a 7600, 7600X, or 9600X would all perform even better than what I showed in the benchmarks, I think it's a perfectly viable alternative to bring the price of the build down. Now, we went with the 7800 X3D in this build because the person I'm building it for does play esports games with a high refresh rate monitor, and they wanted to chase those really high frame rates and improved 1% lows. But if you're not that type of gamer, like me for example, I'm a filthy casual who sucks at competitive online games, so the numbers that the 7500F puts up is good enough. The esports titles definitely had the biggest gaps in performance, and Cyberpunk was the most noteworthy AAA title in my suite of games that showed the noticeable difference between the two chips, but the rest of the AAA titles were fairly close. Like, don't get me wrong, getting 1% lows of 99 in God of War compared to 73 is nice and all, but I'm not sure I would personally want to pay almost $150 to $200 more for that. The 7500F performance was fine here, just as it was in Horizon Forbidden West, Assassin's Creed, Marvel Rivals, Final Fantasy, and Doom. It all comes down to preferences. There is no definitive right or wrong answer for what you can put in here. This build is set up to be flexible enough to support, as cheap as a $150 CPU up to a $360 CPU, and it could still make sense. But yeah, that's gonna wrap it up for this video though. Hope you enjoyed checking out this build that I put together and found this either useful or entertaining in one way or another. Let me know down in the comments below if you were building a somewhat higher end system, higher end than this even, say with a budget of around $2,500, would using an X3D chip be a requirement for you? Why or why not? I look forward to reading all your answers and seeing what the split in the community is. I want to thank you all as always for watching and for continuing to support the channel. Thank you to the channel members for their above and beyond support. Be safe out there, and I'll see you all down in the comments as well as next stream and or video. Bye.